Good evening. In the UK, it's been confirmed today that Boris Johnson will be the country's new Prime Minister. He defeated Jeremy Hunt in the governing Conservative Party's leadership election. He'll take over from the current Prime Minister, Theresa May. Johnson was always favoured to win with his vows to make Britain's departure from the European Union a reality, with or without a deal. In other words, he'll ensure Britain leaves the European Union even if there are no mechanisms in place for goods and services to cross the border at the Channel. Jakkie Cilliers is the head of African Futures and Innovation at the Institute of Security Studies. He joins us now on the line from Sweden. Jakkie, good evening to you. Thank you for your time tonight. What's your reaction to the victory of Boris Johnson? What kind of Prime Minister do you expect him to be?
Well, he's a bit of a wild card, isn't he, Stephen? Nobody really knows. He's very popular. We know that in the rank and file, so he has a bit of an aura of a populist. He was mayor of London twice, and generally is a bit of an unknown quantity, both in the period that he served as Foreign Secretary, as well as the way that he reacts. Certainly the promises that he's made with regard to being able to negotiate a new kind of Brexit deal has got nobody convinced. And the Conservative Party, and indeed the House of Parliament, seems to be as divided as ever, and nobody knows how he's going to bridge this.
He's promised to deliver Brexit with or without a deal. So if there's no deal, there'll be no way to regulate trade between the UK and the EU. How disruptive would that be to the British economy? Are we literally talking about food supplies being stopped at the border?
You know, I think some of that is overblown. We tend to get, we always look at the worst case, us and them kind of scenarios. I do think that a lot of preparation has been made, and that eventually the UK will muddle through. But this is an ignominious end to the British Empire, I think, generally. And and Boris is taking over at a point where Theresa May has tried her best. She has failed. He has got until the end of October to try and arrange something. The European Union has already made it quite clear that they are prepared to accommodate, they're prepared to help, but that really the United Kingdom needs to get its act together. And I don't think that Boris Johnson, he can change the tone, but he can't really change the substance. So I think that we probably are headed for somewhat of an unruly exit by the UK from the European Union.
There's a whole series of dynamics that this involves, and we'll talk about populism in just a moment. But the UK also seems to be withdrawing in some cases from the world. I mean, we don't see it, for example, as playing a bigger role in South Africa or in Africa that people are used to seeing.
It's very true. The UK is diminished. You may remember that Theresa May came to South Africa and promised, I think it was in Cape Town, that she wants to make, amongst the G7, that the UK is going to become the biggest trading partner of Africa. But Britain has literally disappeared in terms of its African policy. It's consumed by this divisive debate, this internal focus. And so I think what we're seeing with the UK is a navel-gazing. Of course, once this challenge, this all-absorbing challenge is over, then maybe we will see some kind of a resurgent United Kingdom, but it's being swallowed up also, of course, between the great war, conflict, ideological tension that is squeezing out everybody else between the United States and China. And the UK is just nowhere to be seen in that broad tussle.
The other big trend, of course, is this sort of wave of populism we've seen. And at this point, I suppose it's obligatory for me to mention Donald Trump in the United States. Are there links between what's happened there, where we've seen people go for someone who doesn't seem to necessarily have a huge political ideology, and to what's happening with Boris Johnson? They seem very different, but they seem very similar at the same time.
Populism is an approach. It's not an ideology. It is an approach to power. It is a way in which you sketch the world as us and them, between the corrupt elite and us, the people. And people like Boris Johnson and Donald Trump and others, in South Africa we see that also, Julius Malema, are adept at sketching the world in this black and white term. And of course the world is not black and white. It's full of shades of grey, and it's complicated. But this ability to use that description is being proven very powerful. It has created a new way of getting to power, but that is actually what populism is all about. There's left-wing and right-wing populism. There's no ideological content to it. It is a tactic, an approach, a way to power. It's about politicians finding a new way to use the media, to use us, to get into the power seat. It has changed very little, but it's become very appealing and being done very effectively by people like Donald Trump.
What are the likely economic consequences of this for South Africa? Britain, a big trading partner for South Africa, but the European Union, I think, still our biggest trading partner, although China is great.
Yes.
What implications does this have for us? I mean, if we see, for example, the European Union not so much consumed by dealing with this, but having to spend some time on it, do we need to worry that people just won't be as interested in trading with us?
I think actually it provides South Africa with certain advantages. For example, when it comes to wines and agricultural exports, we may be able to escape some of the stranglehold that, for example, the French farmers have on some of our exports. There's going to be some disruption. And the United Kingdom is going to struggle. But I think that for South Africa, this is not necessarily in the medium, long-term bad news. And I think that the Department of Trade and Industry has been working hard under the previous minister in preparing for this and to try and hedge our bets. Certainly people are going to get hurt in the process. The United Kingdom is important for South Africa. But I don't think this is necessarily bad news for South Africa.
At the same time, if you look at British society, there might be lessons on what happens when divisions get very deep. If you'd said 10 years ago that Britain would be consumed by one issue, that people wouldn't be speaking to each other in the same family because of their views on the European Union, I think you would literally have been laughed out of class. Now it seems that that is the case. What lessons are there for us, maybe, about what happens when certain issues divide a nation?
I think there are many lessons. South Africans at the moment are consumed by infighting and racial divisions and this classic us-them type of dichotomy that we are speaking about, which is really what populism is all about. So we sketch the others, whether in South Africa that is white monopoly capital or whichever term you want to use, in very stark, clear terms. It's very appealing, but is very dangerous. And South Africa we have our own populist party, and it shares many of the characteristics of populist parties internationally. And this is dangerous for the country. It simplifies things and it paints things in two contrasting camps. And, if you read books like Factfulness that speak about the danger of trying to shape everything in these two boxes, we realize what a danger this has for a country with our divided history. And South Africa has got many, many of these elements as we try and shape a new dawn, as we try and create something that is different to our divided past.
And then in the UK, there's been this sort of traditional politics of Britain from the end of the First World War, really, from the early 1920s, that you'd have either the Conservative Party or the Labour Party in power. Before that, there had been the Liberal Party up before 1920. There's some predictions that this is going to shake up British politics for good. Maybe these divisions become permanent in some ways, but particularly the Conservative Party, which Boris Johnson now takes over, that in fact it might almost split apart, that the next British election might be very different from anything that country has seen for over 100 years.
Yes, certainly it has that potential. It has even larger potential because what is really behind the so-called backstop challenge is really the fear that the Brits have that eventually Northern Ireland will look towards the Republic of Ireland and that we could see the end of the United Kingdom as we know it. And that trend towards greater nationalism, which is also often part of a populist appeal, is in actual fact a large danger. Why the United Kingdom finds it so difficult to deal with the Brexit issue, the backstop issue, the hard, soft border issue. So the world is changing. The United Kingdom faces many, many challenges. It's not only establishment politics. It reflects the impact that globalization, urban-rural divides have upon politics within countries and how that impacts upon how people view the world. And I think that it's yet another sign of how the world is changing now. Rapidly it's changing at the moment.
That's the Institute, that's the ISS head, the Institute for Security Studies head of African Futures and Innovation, Jakkie Cilliers. Jakkie, thank you very much indeed for your time tonight.